Well, it's a pleasure being here. I'm sorry I do not speak German because I think that I've looked at the program and I see the different speakers. I think it looks like an excellent program. I'd like to introduce myself just a little bit. First of all, have any people here in the room taken part in my survey any time in the last 9 years? Okay, good. That's a tiny, tiny minority. Which is okay. The survey, the 9th survey opens, if everything goes well, the 1st of October, so next week, and I would invite you to participate if you would like to. You get, this is the report that comes out of it. You get a copy of the report in PDF version if you participate in the survey. And in fact, with Bjorn, we're going to give away 2 of these copies, these 2 books, after the coffee break this morning. I need to leave to go back to France, where I live. I have a lot of work to do if the survey is going to open on time, and I don't understand any German. So I hope you will forgive my being what you call in English a hit-and-run speaker. That's not normally what I do, but that's what I'm going to be doing this time. So I've been working with very large organizations for a very long time, conducting my research for 9 years. I have a group of practitioners that I work with in Paris, and I myself am American by birth, French by choice as of the last 3 years, because I have made my adult life in France, and I would say in Europe. So that's a little bit about my background. Just to give you a sense of the organizations I've worked with, they're global companies, large companies, headquartered primarily in Europe, not exclusively. I've also had the really interesting opportunity to work with different United Nations agencies, which was absolutely fascinating. I thought they were going to be very different from large, I would say, profit-driven organizations, but in fact, no. The human issues, the organizational issues, they're very, very similar. As I said when Bjorn was talking at the beginning, there were 314 organizations that participated in the survey this year. The report, the data that I'm going to be showing you today is from the end of 2013. The report was published in February 2014. There's always a gap of about 2 months, the time I need to put this together. And as I said, you're welcome to join the survey this year if you think it would be interesting for you. So the first question, Bjorn actually gave me a very precise 5 statements to answer. Definition of the digital workplace, status today, challenges, recommendations, and trends. And so I respectfully followed his outline, which I thought was a great outline. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is, what is the digital workplace? And it's defined in so many different ways by so many different people. I began using the term 3 years ago, and a lot of my colleagues, other consultants and agencies, and some large companies accused me, very politely, of creating a buzzword just to make more money, sort of a marketing fad. What is interesting is, I don't know if you've noticed, about 2 or 3 months ago, Gartner now has a whole operation oriented around the digital workplace in their research and their conferences and their seminars. And on my blog, there's a blog post I wrote saying the digital workplace is a 10-year-old term, but it's taken on new life. It was used as long as 10 years ago, but not in any really significant way. And as of the last few years, it's really taken on a lot of meaning for different people. Some people see it as a question of mobility, and they define it as the capability of working any place, anytime, which is part of it. And I like this photo, which I took myself at the Roissy Charles de Gaulle airport, because we see the 2 worlds that live in organizations today, sort of back to back. You know, they're sitting in the same seating arrangement, but they're not facing each other, and they are 2 extremes of what we have in most organizations today. And it also shows the idea of mobility, which is only a small part of the digital workplace. This would be a dream way, wouldn't it, if technology were the answer to the digital workplace, if it was purely a question of technology. So many people say that, in fact, it's a negative aspect of the digital workplace, is that it's always on, 24/7. You need to be available at home on the weekend, during vacation. You've got your mobile devices and so on. And that's an interesting challenge for people like you who work on digital workplace projects to think about. It has a lot of implications for people. So my answer is no. Those things are not the digital workplace. It's actually much more. And I want to take you through very quickly a series of slides that I built up to show you the concept of a digital workplace. It's a model that was defined in large part by myself, but with a lot of very critical input from the advisory board that I create each year. I do the survey. There's an advisory board of from 15 to 20 people, some practitioners and some thought leaders from different parts of the world who work with me interactively online, helping me define the topics and what we're going to look at each year. Bjorn has been on the board for the last 2 years, and his contributions have had a certain impact on the development of things. So this model was created over 2 years, but not published until February of this year. And the definition that we've given to the digital workplace is that it's the place where people, organization, and technology come together, which means that you have capabilities in the organization, you have certain things that enable the organization, and you have a certain mindset in the organization. By the way, these slides will be made available to you. I'm sure you have a solution for that. So you will have a copy of the slides that I'm showing you, plus additional ones in the back of the presentation with some data that I'm not going to actually use in the presentation. So you don't really need to take notes if you don't want to. So there we have 3 dimensions: the capabilities, the enablers, and the mindset. I'd like to just run through this really quickly. The capabilities exist really on 3 different levels. There's me, what I can do in my job in the organization. There's the sense of business capabilities. How can your organization, how does it conduct its business? What is it capable of doing? How does it communicate with customers, and et cetera, et cetera. And there's organizational, enterprise capabilities, which I define as those things that stretch across your organization. For example, the capability of finding an expert anywhere in the organization, even if you don't know the person's name. That's an enterprise capability versus a business capability. Has to do with the people in your organization who are customer-facing, or the people in the organization who provide products and services and support the customer-facing people. My research is not the whole external digital workplace in the world. My research is focused on an organization, an enterprise, but serving customers is a very big part of that. The enablers that we define, this was a hard one to define. We spent a lot of time finding the right terms. We talk about process, that's to say new ways of doing things. We talk about structure, and we define structure as virtual structures, which are more and more important these days. Team places, community places, social networking places, these places that are places without being physical places that bring people together for different purposes. And reach is very important. Can you reach everyone in your organization? Can everyone in your organization reach other people in the organization? That's a key thing. This is something I think completely new in the definition of a digital workplace, and we'll start with leadership, which I defined as influence that brings change. It involves the top managers, of course, in an organization, but it also involves community managers, anyone working in the organization. There might be an activist, someone who believes strongly in collaboration. There could be what you might call a corporate rebel, who is looking for new ways of doing things. All these are people who provide leadership. There's a culture in an organization. An asset is to treat the digital workplace as a strategic asset, essential for doing business, which involves governance, decision-making, guidelines, and a lot of different things. So the status today, so this is where my results are very close to what Bjorn presented. The model that you just saw has been converted now into, here we have the capabilities, the enablers, the mindset, you have the different parts here, with 5 different levels on a maturity scale. The 5 different levels are typical 5-level maturity scale, where you start with things that are ad hoc, they're just beginning, they're optimized, they're operational, and they're embedded in the organization. That's not I didn't invent the maturity scale, that's fairly standard. What's different is applying it to these criteria in a digital workplace concept. Here are the results from last year. Out of the 314 organizations, I took the top 20% in terms of points that were allocated to them from over 100 questions that they had answered online. The survey takes about an hour to do. You can do it in chunks of time, but it's an in-depth survey. And so I had a lot of data points that were mapped to numbers, and the top 20% I called early adopter organizations. And you see that their scores brought them out to the optimized level. That's 20% of the organization, whereas the majority of organizations are at the beginning level. Obviously, there were a few at level 4 and a few at level 1, but this is basically where they fit. The blue diamonds that you see here are the early adopters. The gray diamonds are the majority. What is absolutely fascinating for me was the fact that if you look at the two patterns of the early adopters and the majority, you see the same reflection there. For example, you see that the business dimension, the core activity of the organization, is a little bit higher than the individual capability of what people can do as individuals. If you look at this area over here, there's huge gaps between structure and process. Structures are pretty much in place today. We've got places, virtual places in our organization, social networks that have been deployed to some extent, but the processes of the organization are not yet taking full advantage of them. Practically every company in the survey has a gap of more or less between these two things. I also find it very interesting that in the early adopters, as well as in the majority of organizations, leadership was the lowest scored. So it's interesting to see that we're just starting the journey. All organizations have similar challenges, but it's a question of degree. And of course, depending on the industry sector you're in, there are constraints that you have, there are advantages that you have, there are a lot of differences. And the report has analysis industry by industry, which obviously I'm not going to show to you today. But that's taken into account because that does make a huge difference. I looked at what early adopter organizations have in common, because that's really one of the purposes of this research is what are these organizations who are out in front, what are they doing? We defined in the survey 4 what we call business scenarios. How flexible is your organization when you're faced with sudden change? How easy or difficult is it for the customer-facing people in front of the customer to serve the customer? Can people in the organization, as they work, as a natural part of working, can they learn? Is it a learning organization? Can they develop their skills? And I don't mean go to a training course, but within the flow of work, is it possible to learn? And the 4th scenario was, if your experts leave or the older generation retires, will you be losing a lot of knowledge and know-how or not? And because we have a small amount of time this morning, I'm going to go through the responses to this very quickly, but you can study it in more detail. On this part of the slide, you always have the early adopters on the right, you have the majority on the left, and the numbers that you see here are in percentages. This is, for example, 20% of the early adopters. This is 4% of the majority. That's the way you read the chart. And you can see each time, for each one of the business scenarios, the early adopters rated, self-assessed their organization. This is self-assessment by the organizations as either being it's very easy or relatively easy. Same thing for the learning in the flow of work. There's a huge difference there. Look at the difference. And retaining knowledge and know-how. So that's just a review of the 4 scenarios that we looked at. And what I did afterwards, I took the organizations that had responded at the top level of the ease or the confidence that the organization could do those business scenarios. And then I generated a chart based on questions, another question I had asked about your culture of your organization. The question was, is your organization team-oriented or individually competitive? Do people have freedom to experiment, or are rules mandatory? When a mistake is made, do people learn from it, or is there a punishment, etc.? So we opposed these things, and it was very interesting to see that the organizations that had self-assessed at the highest levels in the business scenarios had cultures that were more open, more participatory, and more of an entrepreneurial attitude of encouraging people to experiment, and mistakes were not punished as such. So I find that link between the culture and the organization and business performance interesting. But I'm not saying the digital workplace is the cause that creates that culture. And I'm not saying that kind of culture means that you can do a digital workplace much easier. Because I don't think it's possible to know. Those two things correlate. And I think there are learnings from the fact that they correlate. But you have to be very careful when you look at statistics and when you read things and you look at reports by agencies, consultants, yourself, if you do something internally. Don't draw conclusions necessarily about this causes this unless you are able to prove that. But this exists and that correlates with this in the same situation. And it's important to make that distinction. I don't have an answer to this question. So I'm just raising the question to point it out to you. Every organization who took the survey was asked, what are the top strategic drivers for your organization? They had a list of 6, they had to choose 3. Efficiency and cost savings, organizational intelligence, engagement and belonging, agility and speed, business performance. And I'll let you look at that in more detail later, but what I found interesting was over 50% of the of the top 3 industries, Sorry, I didn't explain that properly. This chart is based on the organizations in the top 3 industries in terms of the digital workplace. And those top 3 industries are consumer retail, professional services, and engineering and construction. Those were the industries where the organizations who participated had the highest scores. So I took those, put them into a group, and ran this chart. And in that small segment, over 50% of them had put business performance as one of their 3 objectives. It's not the top one, but it is one of them. Whereas in the majority, 40% put that as an objective. And I think that when you make business one of the strategic drivers for your digital workplace, you are much more likely to be able to gain momentum and succeed, partly because you are more likely to be funded from the people who have budgets. And it brings a reality to the digital workplace that takes it beyond the concept of improved collaboration, share information. All those things are important. But when you actually relate it to why do you collaborate, why do you share information, you want to serve your customers better, it brings a lot of, how would I say, energy into your projects if you're in a project phase. I have put 2 case studies in this presentation that I will let you read later. The first is Arup, an engineering company, about 20,000 people, headquartered in London. The people work around the world. And they have a fantastic story. It's one of the case studies in the report. And their story was when Hurricane Sandy hit New York, they had a client who had incredible damage from the flooding and the storm. And Arup was able to go back to they don't call it a social network, it was their discussion groups. And they were able in 24 hours to collect advice and photographs of how their clients from all around the world, the cities around the world that had had a similar problem, how they dealt with it, and bring it to their client 24 hours later, which made an incredible impact on the client. That's an organization who works very much with the customer in focus. Lexmark, also case study in the report, is focused very much in a different way on the people of the organization. It's 2 different focuses, one focused very much on customer, one very much on people. And the CIO of Lexmark says that people need to have the ability to do something, the opportunity to do it, and they need the motivation. And therefore, we have a flexible BYOD policy plus cloud. We have flexible HR. People can decide to work at home or not work at home. They are free to do what they want to do. And they have a social network they have deployed and they are working on. So what's interesting is that what these early adopter organizations have together, in my personal analysis, is they have a focus on people in the organization and a focus on customers. They're not focusing so much on the tools. What are the challenges? Where do you think the biggest challenge is? Mindship? No, culture. That's part of it. That's the biggest challenge. I have run workshops in Copenhagen at a conference. I did the same thing in Berlin at a conference. I did it in Paris, sort of my hometown as such. And we did brainstorming and clustering and discussion, and you know how you do these workshops. And the question was, what are the main obstacles that you're facing in your digital projects? And when we analyzed them afterwards, not exclusively, but at least I would say 80% of them all came down to leadership in the organization, the culture of our organization, and how we are managing it in general. Not detailed rules about what to do and what not to do, but in general, what is the governance of it. And we have things here that may be obvious to you. There's too much focus on the tool. People are not willing to rethink how they work. And this is operational people sometimes, and it's higher level people in the organization. But it's a very clear challenge. Management often wants proof of quantifiable ROI. How much will I save? How much will I gain if we do that? And that's very, very difficult, sometimes impossible to show, especially at the beginning of a project. Decision making is often very slow, and there's a lot of politics. As the digital workplace gets closer and closer to the business, the heart of the organization, you begin to have a lot of political things that come to the surface in terms of who owns what, who's in charge of what, who makes what kind of decision. And these are obstacles that 50% of the majority said they are a serious challenge and they are holding us back. And I was amazed to see that 50% of the early adopters had exactly the same challenges at the top, but they said it's a manageable challenge for us. It requires special effort. So you can see the early adopters are simply one step ahead, but they are still dealing with the same issues. The recommendations I have to make for you are fairly detailed and practical, so we're not going to go into it in a lot of detail now. But I see 5 types of stakeholders for the digital workplace. The first is the business people, the core activity people, if you're a non-business organization, and you have certain goals that you want to provide products, you want to remain relevant, you want to be connected to your customers. So that's one dimension, but only one dimension. Individual people, from a personal viewpoint, they want to express themselves, have a certain amount of freedom, motivated, be recognized, learn, etc. That's a second dimension. Third dimension that I've gone into detail here for is the customer, the public. They want to get good service, good products from you. They want to understand what your organization is about. They want to be part of a conversation with your organization. That's 3 so far. The fourth perspective is the enterprise group perspective. And here you can take the picture, that's the last one. The management perspective, the people responsible for the financial aspect of the organization, the legal aspect of the organization, and so on. So these are 5 types of stakeholders that have their different views, their different needs, which brings a lot of complexity to a digital workplace project. When you set it up, or when you're working on it, you need to have a core team, you need to have a steering group, you have different names for different levels and so on. But what's really important is that it be cross-organizational, the members, cross-functional, and cross-hierarchy. It must itself reflect the diversity that you have in the needs. And we are running out of time, so what I have here now, let me just give it to you completely. You have it in detail on the slides. I've listed a few bullet points for each one of the 5 stakeholders, suggesting techniques that you can use to explore the needs from each one of these 5 perspectives. The overall message I have for you is that you cannot work by yourself on this. You need to do a lot of research, and you need to involve the peripheries of your organization in not just informing them, but in the decision-making about the organization. The trends are, I think, pretty obvious. One trend is, this is data over 5 years, and the capabilities of being able to express oneself, share information, knowledge are increasing over the 5 years. You see 2008, 2013. Social networking, you get the impression sometimes that every organization has a social network. It's not true. They don't. This is a deployment chart here. We see over 40% last year had deployed a social network. So I think this is clearly going to be increasing. Based on the data I collected fairly detailed last year, mobile services should exist in 30 to 40% of organizations by the end of this year. So it'll be really interesting to see if that's the case, if the intentions that people expressed last year actually turned into reality this year. And of course, the cloud. The whole aspect of the cloud, accessing anything, anywhere, anytime, is going to have a profound impact and going to evolve a lot in how the digital workplace operates, how your organization operates. So I'd like to invite you to participate in the survey. Because I'm going to be leaving after the coffee break, if you want to continue to converse with me, don't hesitate to contact me on Twitter or by email. I'm happy to Skype with you or talk with you. I'm not the kind of consultant who then tries to turn it into a commercial opportunity. I have plenty of commercial opportunities, and I'm very happy to dialogue, to answer questions, to talk with you. So, voila. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jane, for those fabulous insights. So you said there are really big difference, or there's no pattern on overall of the strategies and experience and recommendations on regarding the industries or size of companies. So because we're always looking for patterns, so where we can relate to. But you said there is none.
Well, there are some patterns in industries, because industries have certain constraints or a certain background. For example, government agencies have the lowest level of maturity in my survey, and the three I mentioned to you earlier have the highest level. The bigger the organization is, the more likely the digital workplace will be developed. That is because big organizations, global organizations, cannot work without it. Small organizations still can, or somewhat to a certain degree. So these companies, small companies with, say, 500, under 1,000 employees, are usually less advanced. But there are no real patterns in terms of what they do and what they don't do.
Is the research showing any results on from where those projects have been developed? So are they coming? Are they new? Are they just entering with the idea of installing or establishing a digital workplace, or are they developing something from an intranet background?
Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, many of the projects originate because organizations realize they have too many tools, too many platforms, and they need to bring it together. So you get the internet people who are often very conflictual with the people who own collaboration, the people who own document management, and the organization wants to rationalize all this. And a very good way of doing it is to create the idea of a digital workplace or a single place or whatever you want to call it. And in some cases, it's the first time that these entities or these people, these owners, have begun talking to each other. IT is driving it in a certain way, but that tends to be spending less on technology or getting everybody on the same technology. Communication is trying to reach everybody in the organization. They can't get the people on the floor and in the field. And so you have these different drivers. HR is usually the slowest one to come on board. Is there any HR person here in the room? Oh, dear, be careful. And how about IT people? IT? Yeah, you see, that's the way it is in the digital workplace also. And communication, marketing? Yeah, that's exactly the way it is. You get communication, marketing, you get IT people, and every now and then you have HR, which is a huge problem. HR has a major role to play, and they're not playing it yet.
But would you say that the term or the idea to follow up a project on the digital workplace is the right term to get everybody together? Because at the end, for a successful project, we need everybody working together on this. So is the digital workplace? Because normally, well, the communications people, they came from the social, from the intranet, maybe nowadays from the social intranet. The IT people and organizational people are more coming from the social collaboration space. And is digital workplace really uniting now everything so we can join forces?
I think you need to find the right term that suits the organization. And I've had organizations that don't want to use the word digital because they think that people will consider it to be just tools. Some organizations want to focus on the idea of workplace, which is good. Others give a completely different name to the project. It depends very much on the history and what other terms are being used for other high-profile projects in the organization. I need to use a single term when I communicate as an external person, so that's the term that I use, but you have to be very careful and aware. It's worth testing whatever term you use, that it resonates well with the people involved. It's a really good question. If you choose the wrong term, you can kill the enthusiasm in the project. People will misunderstand it.
Gibt's Fragen? Wir haben ja, Mikrofon wird, oder ich komme auch schnell kurz.
Hello, I have a question actually to the second slide of your presentation. You had a very good picture of people sitting at the airport. And there was one man with his newspaper and the others with their smartphones.
Yep.
And this reflects very much to the situation in my organization. And we have a big discussion about demographic change at the moment. So we have one group that has, in fact, already difficulties to enable itself to collaboration with the SharePoint and email even. Mm-hmm. And the other group who is eager to try out new working techniques. And we really have a discussion how we can bring this together. So do you have any...
You need to find a project, a real project, independently of the different platforms where those people are working together. In your business, in your activity. I don't know what your activity is, but in whatever that is, there must be real projects where you have a combination of those two groups of people. And if they are working together, they need to find the best way of working together, and you need to hand-hold and let them choose together what the best tools are once they see what the tools are available. I think you need to start things like this with groups and teams that are already working on a real project and show them how different ways of working can make things easier. You can't just come out of the sky and say, I have a better way of working for you. Start with people who are working and bring them something.
So bring the newspaper guys into the project.
Those guys are useful too. They have a lot of knowledge and experience about the organization.
Yeah, they have. That's why it is a problem.
Absolutely. You can't kick them out.
If you could miss them, it wouldn't be one.
Yeah, exactly.
Hi, Jane. I just have a question in terms of leadership and in terms of the behavior and practicing social business. Do you have any experience of a company who put really a specific training in place?
A specific?
A training for like educating leaders in that way, or dealing with that kind of work style?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a very good question. I think that training as such is not the best way of dealing with it. And I have a list of change drivers that the people indicated which ones were the most effective. Training is near the bottom of the list. And if you need to find one or two people at a leadership level who understand and they are champions and they start working that way, and there'll be a peer-to-peer relationship that you, if you're not at that level, will not be able to achieve. And I think you need to find people. It's a bit like the answer I gave to the lady who asked the question. Find real examples. Every company has real examples today. Maybe not many, but you've got some, and you need to build around those. If you have not a single one, then maybe some training.
But that's
you need to start somewhere, or find another company, works similar to yours, bring someone in from the outside. But it's that peer-to-peer conversation that will make people change much more than you saying, look, guys, you need to work like this. Or me as a consultant from the outside, hey, you need to work like this. Peer-to-peer is the way to bring change, in my experience.
Okay, so making it personal is
making it personal. And they identified that guy's like me. I can see why he's doing it. Not she's a consultant, but that guy is like me. So.